After the almighty algorithm decided to choke our videos on the third age of Tolkien's universe, we, being gluttons for punishment, decided to make videos on the first age, so the almighty algorithm can strangle them too. So welcome to the first video on the earliest period of the history of Arda, as we cover the events that led to the war against the first Dark Lord, Morgoth. Consider liking, sharing and commenting, it might save us from asphyxiation, or not, whatever floats our collective swan ships. There's a decent chance that hearing about a world written into existence by someone else makes you want to try it yourself, and for that we offer you a special deal from our sponsor, World Anvil. It's the ultimate world-building toolset and RPG campaign manager. It packages the whole creative process together, providing tools for organizing maps, developing encyclopedias of lore, and straight-up writing content. The upside to keeping it all in World Anvil is that it's easy to distribute, collaborate, and ultimately monetize. And of course it's extremely useful for anyone who needs to see or update the work to do so at any time, making it perfect for running role-playing campaigns in particular. Loads of rule sets are natively supported and more are on the way. Even if it's just for you, the wiki-like database of lore, interactive maps, character sheets, timelines, and relationship diagrams make writing your best-selling novel much easier. It's got your data covered too. World Anvil makes secure backups in multiple locations every day to protect your universe from disasters in the real world. You can check out World Anvil via our link in the description. If you use our code WIZARDS, they'll give you 40% off all recurring memberships, so support our channel and your imagination by taking a look. Before the creation, there was Eru Iluvatar, father of all, wielder of the flame imperishable, and the supreme deity who subsequently saw fit to create the Ainur. The Ainur, or Holy Ones, were a group of primordial spirits, fashioned from the flame imperishable itself. The universe, Ea, and Arda, the world upon which the events of the Silmarillion take place, were created through the Ainulin Dali, or the music of Ainur, who were all in harmony, save for one of them, Melkor, who disrupted it with discordant tones. Upon the creation of Arda, the Ainur descended to the surface, deciding to live there as long as it should last, and 14 of the most powerful among them became the Valar, or the powers of the world. Melkor, who would become known as Morgoth, claimed lordship over Arda. The other Valar opted for Manwë, who despite not being as powerful as Melkor, understood the thoughts of Eru more than any other. Melkor turned away from such a path, becoming the first Dark Lord and forever altering the future of Arda. The remaining Ainur, who were lesser in power, were to become the Maiar following their descent. The Valar would then set about bettering the world they found themselves in. However, Melkor would continuously disrupt their efforts, as he had initially in disrupting their music. For a long time, Melkor set his might against that of the other Valar, and held the upper hand due to his immense strength, ensuring that Arda remained shapeless due to his destructive nature. That was of course until the mighty Tulkas made his way to Arda, and upon his descent, tipped the balance in favour of the Valar, forcing Melkor to flee from Arda for a time. This departure allowed the Valar to make something of the world in preparation for the coming of the elves. They constructed two great lamps, Iluin the silver lamp to the north, and Ormul the golden lamp to the south, which brought light to the world, setting their main place of dwelling within their light. This caused an explosion in biological life, which came to be known as the First Spring, but it was not to last, as Melkor returned to Arda along with a number of Maiar spirits who had attuned themselves to his music. Melkor then created a mighty fortress in the north, naming it Utumno, and to defend it, raised the Iron Mountains. Decay would begin to emerge from this portion of Arda, alerting the Valar. It was too late. Melkor emerged from Utumno, bringing and casting the lamps down. The fire contained within them burned through a vast portion of Arda, and in attempting to contain such wanton destruction, Melkor was allowed to flee north. Following this destruction, the Valar withdrew to the continent of Aman, and upon this land built Valinor, allowing Melkor to assume his reign over Middle-earth. In creating Valinor, the Vala Yavanna, the giver of fruits, sang into existence the two trees, Silver Telperion, considered to be male, and the golden Laurelin, deemed female. They would provide the light the world now lacked, starting the Years of the Trees. Meanwhile, Melkor turned the once beautiful Middle-earth into a dark and cruel land filled with terrible creatures. He also built a lesser fortress to the west as a bulwark against the Valar, Angband. The Valar were unsure where the elves would awake, and remained unwilling to wage open war and risk them. As a result, Melkor sent spirits to assault the fledgling elves in the form of great horsemen, in order to cause them to fear the Valar Orome, Lord of the Forests, who would be the first to come upon them in his forays into Middle-earth. Melkor then began capturing the elves through his servants, corrupting them through torture and foul magic, crafting the first orcs in mockery of the elves and Eru Ilúvatar. The remaining elves were aided by Orome, who quickly came to love them and determined that he would not allow them to be consumed by Melkor's hatred. Melkor's ascendancy was challenged, as Valar Orome forced the other Valar into immediate action, and in the War of the Powers, the overwhelming force of the Valar devastated the enemy, forcing him to retreat to Utumno, and after a brutal siege, the Valar dragged Melkor from its darkness, bounding him with the great chain, the Agenor, which had been forged by the Valar Elui, the great smith of the Valar. Melkor was brought to Valinor, where he pleaded for clemency. This was granted, but he was to remain chained within the halls of Mandos for 3 ages. While this seemed to be the end of the matter, the Valar had failed to fully destroy Utumno, leaving many of its pits and vaults unexplored, and as a result, a corrupted Maiar, Sauron, remained at large. The Valar also didn't destroy the Balrogs, also known as the Valaraukar, who gathered at the ruined remnants of Angband and began a lengthy hibernation in preparation for the return of their Dark Lord. Orome returned to the elves to summon them to Aman to live in peace and harmony among the Valar. However, many of them feared the immense power which the Valar had unleashed in their war against Melkor, and they sent 3 representatives to inspect Aman. Ingwe, Finwë and Elwë returned, speaking of the glory and bliss of Valinor, and this began the Great Journey, which also came to be known as the Sundering of the Elves, as all of the elvish people agreed to join the Valar in Valinor, apart from the Avari, who chose to remain. Of the 3 main groups of elves who agreed to make their way to Valinor, the Vanya and the Noldor were most eager, and reached the coast first, being taken to Valinor on an island of Tol Eressëa, with the Valar Ulmo guiding them across the Belegir, also known as the Sundering Sea. The Teleri, drawn to the forests and rivers of Middle-earth, were the slowest of the groups, allowing their curiosity to get the better of them. This caused them to separate into multiple splinter groups, such as the Nandor, who would go on to become the Wood Elves of Wilderland, and later that of Beleriand. Many of the Teleri who disliked the sea withdrew, settling in the wooded areas of Regin and Neldoreth that would later come to be known as the Doriath. The Teleri who were drawn most deeply to the sea settled the western shores, becoming the Falathrim, and would later be ruled by the elf Círdan, who would found the coastal cities of Elgarest and Brythombar. However, the majority of the Teleri would eventually leave Middle-earth and would go to the island Tol Eressëa, led by Olwe, who would become their king, as his brother Elwë never returned to Valinor. The 3 elven clans would develop their own differing and rich cultures, with Ingwe becoming the king of the Vanyar and Finwë of the Noldor. Following the end of his sentence, Melkor feigned repentance, and Manwë, incapable of comprehending his corruption, ordered his release. For a time, Melkor behaved once more as the true thought of Eru which he had initially been formed to represent. However, Tulkas and Ulmo, the Valar most associated with water, were slow to forgive and remained vigilant. In truth, his immense defeat at the hands of the Valar had roused even greater malice within Melkor, who sought to bring ruin to Aman. Gazing upon the paradise the elves now enjoyed, Melkor's greatest desire became the corruption of this race, and he found the Noldor the most willing to listen. Melkor spread lies among them, bringing the Valar, and particularly their reasoning for bringing the elves to Aman, to disrepute. He claimed the Valara neglected to inform the elves of the coming of the race of man, and a vast portion of the Noldor now believed that the Valar had stolen their birthright, Middle-earth, by bringing them to Aman to allow the men to inhabit those lands exclusively. The Noldor would begin to openly dissent against the Valar, with chief amongst these dissenters being Feanor, the firstborn son of Finwë. Born in Valinor during the Years of the Trees, Feanor drew so much strength from his mother Miriel that she voluntarily left her life to go to the halls of Mandos. After some time, his father Finwë would remarry an elvish woman, Indis, who bore him 4 further children: Fingolfin, Finarfin, Findis, and Irimi. Feanor disliked his mother-in-law and wasn't fond of his step-siblings. He lived apart from them during his time as an apprentice to the master smith Matan, learning his craft at the feet of the Vala Alui himself. Matan taught him much of metallurgy, and he would soon marry his daughter, Nerdinel, who bore him 7 sons. Feanor spent the majority of his time either in solitude or among his children, who were completely loyal to him. He became restless, exploring the majority of Aman, and continuously crafting new and increasingly masterful works. The greatest achievement of Feanor was the creation of 3 breathtaking gems, Silmarils. He captured the intermingled light of the 2 trees of Valinor and sealed it into 3 large diamond-like gems. Their beauty brought great praise to Feanor, and he came to love these gems above all else, coveting them with immense greed, ignoring that the light which ensured their beauty was not of his own making. He would vainly put the jewels on display one day, before fearing for their welfare the next and guarding them from all but his closest family members. His greed and jealousy would eventually cause him to keep the jewels under lock and key at all times. In spite of his immense hatred and fear of Melkor, Feanor became the loudest Noldor expressing discontent with the stewardship of the Valar, who were distracted by this young princeling, which allowed Melkor to continue his work in the background unperturbed. The Valar did not act immediately, as was their way, and were only roused to action when Feanor threatened his brother Fingolfin with violence, causing them to summon the elf to the Ring of Doom to answer for his actions. Feanor claimed that Melkor had convinced him that his half-brother sought to usurp his heirship to his father's position and to take from him the Silmarils. Tulkas immediately departed in search of his hated enemy, but Melkor could not be found. Although he was provoked by Melkor, Feanor's actions and their consequences remained his own, and the Valar exiled him to Formenos in the hills to the north of Valinor, and he went away taking with him an immense treasure, including the Silmarils. In a show of support, Finwë renounced his kingship and joined his son in exile, refusing to take up the mantle of rulership again so long as Feanor remained in exile. Sometime later, Melkor came to Formenos feigning friendship in an attempt to wrest from the elf his most prized possessions. Feanor saw through this and refused the Dark Lord's platitudes, shutting the doors of Formenos. Fearing the ill portents of this visit, Finwë reported the incident to the Valar, who once again failed to catch Melkor. The latter fled, unwilling to face the might of his counterparts, before coming to Avattahar and finding Ungoliant, a primordial the origin of which remains unknown, who took the shape of a spider of gigantic proportions. Melkor promised the great spider that he would finally satiate her unrelenting hunger and led her back to Valinor. 7 years after Feanor's exile, the Valar decided to reconcile with the Noldor and announced a great feast to which the exile was also invited. During the feast, Fingolfin recognized the seniority of his brother before the gathered crowds, and Feanor begrudgingly accepted his acknowledgement. Their father Finwë did not get to see this, as he had stayed at home, keeping to his promise to remain in Formenos until his son's exile was over. Unfortunately for the Valars, they had left the trees unguarded, allowing Melkor to use a great spear to pierce them. Ungoliant started feasting upon the sap which flowed from the foul gashes, drained the trees, and poisoned them, causing them to wither and die, plunging Aman once more into darkness. The Valar, realizing that the only way to restore the 2 trees was through the Silmarils, asked for them from Feanor, who refused to give them up of his own free will, stating that forcing his hand would make them no better than Melkor. This all-encompassing darkness caused fear and despair across Valinor, and in this confusion, Melkor slayed Finwë, stealing the Silmarils and Feanor's other gems. However, the Silmarils were of immense purity, and they burned Melkor's hands with unimaginable agony. Still, he refused to release them, and was brutally burned. With the Valar chasing them, Melkor and Ungoliant fled north, cloaked by the unlight of the latter. Crossing the grinding ice of the Helcaraxi, they made their way to Middle-earth. Here they came upon the ruins of Angband, and Melkor sought to abandon his companion. Ungoliant quickly saw through Melkor's ruse, demanding that he surrender the gems in order to satiate her hunger. However, the Valar refused, prompting Ungoliant to attack. Empowered from draining the two trees, she was able to weave her dark webbing around Melkor. The cries of pain and woe this drew from the Dark Lord awakened the Balrogs from their sleep in Angband's darkest depths. They swiftly came to their lord's aid, driving away the great spider who fled before their might. Melkor, anticipating that his actions would not come without consequences, began to rebuild his fell fortress of Angband to stand before what was yet to come. Upon learning of what had transpired, Feanor cursed Melkor, naming him Morgoth, or Black Foe of the World. Ignoring his exile, Feanor, the now king of his people, returned the city of the Noldor to Tirion and gave a dark speech. "Fair shall the end be," he cried, "though long and hard shall be the road. Say farewell to bondage, but say farewell also to ease. Say farewell to the weak, say farewell to your treasures, more still shall we make. Journey light, but bring with you your swords, for we will go further than Tauros, endure longer than Tulkas. We will never turn back from pursuit. After Morgoth to the ends of the earth, war shall he have and hatred undying. But when we have conquered and have regained the Silmarils that he stole, then behold, we alone, shall be the lords of the unsullied light, and masters of the bliss and the beauty of Arda. No other race shall oust us." His rage blinded him, causing the new king to include many of the lies Morgoth had fed him, and simultaneously unfairly blaming much of his suffering upon the Valar. While this alone roused the anger of his people, what was to come next would forever alter the future of Arda. Feanor swore an oath upon the name of Eru Ilúvatar himself. Be he foe or friend, be he foul or clean, brood of Morgoth or bright Vala, elder or Maya or aftercomer, man yet unborn upon Middle-earth, neither law nor love nor league of swords, dread nor danger, not doom itself, shall defend him from Feanor and Feanor's kin. Whoso hideth or hoardeth, or in hand taketh, finding keepeth or afar casteth a Silmaril. This swear we all. Death we will deal him ere day's ending. Woe unto world's end. Our word hear thou, Eru All-Father. To the everlasting darkness doom us if our deed faileth. On the holy mountain hear in witness, and our vow remember, Manwë and Vada. This would come to be the great woe of his family and the elves themselves, wreaking upon them and the land they would tread death and destruction at every turn. However, this is the story for our next documentary. The next few videos on our series on the history of the Middle-earth universe will be dedicated to the battles of the First Age, but we're planning to cover the battles of many other fantasy, sci-fi and space opera universes, so make sure you have subscribed and pressed the bell button. Please consider liking and sharing, as it helps immensely, and don't forget to comment. We'll try to read and respond to every comment, as we want to know what you think about this video and which videos you hope to see in the future. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.